So we'll try to find out how they did fare in the state of Rivers in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. Usually a very, very interesting state as far as elections are concerned. So how is it panning out this time around? Well, we'll be finding out from our correspondent, Emmanuel Ereyi, who combed the nooks and crannies of the state earlier in the day. And of course, he has this update on the preparations and the mood ahead of the elections, 2019 elections in Rivers State. Emmanuel.
Thank you, Charles. It's the night before election day in Port Harcourt, Rivers State. And one of the things that you can easily notice is that there are less number of cars on the road, suggesting that many residents would have traveled to their various localities to cast their votes. The expectation comes with some mixed feelings of desire and worry. While some look forward to casting their votes for their chosen candidates, others are hoping to see the polls peaceful and violence-free. And with the counter-accusations and counter-accusations over the role of the army in the polls, and of course, the allegations of the possible compromise of the security architecture, many will be looking to see how things eventually pan out security-wise. And this may come as interesting to some as the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has just reported that voters should be wary of fake dollars in circulation for those who may indulge in vote buying, and that will be coming across to many as something to watch out for. Back to you guys.
For that update, and of course, you know, he made this very important point, the monetization of elections. You know, we talk about vote buying, we talk about vote selling. And of course, it's one of the things INEC actually warned against, and, you know, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and, of course, other security agencies also held different discussions about the issue of vote buying. Well, Ayo,
yes,
I understand.
yes, I actually was going to talk about that in particular. Now, Mr. Gunye, you heard from that report. Well, let's put it in a broader perspective. In other parts of the country, this is an issue that normally comes up, you know, vote buying and vote selling and some of these electoral malpractices. But it does appear that every election year, it just keeps propping up, and we haven't found a solution for it. What do you think is the problem?
Well, the problem is traceable to one fundamental reason, and that's that political actors in our country, very sadly, see politics as a means of corrupt enrichment, largely, and for primitive accumulation of capital. They want to build empires, they want to conquer the world, they want to own everywhere. And so they see politics as being central to the process of accumulation, illicit accumulation. And so to get to that point where they have their hands on the lever of power,
controlling state resources.
They want to break the banks. They want to spend money. They want to do all sorts of things. They are desperate. And in the mix, they kill. You know, because you have to take everything together. It's not just about spending money. It's not just about buying the conscience of the electorate or contaminating the process. It's also about killing people, about engaging in blatant criminality in order to access power, realizing that once they get that power, they can then do a lot of things and all that. And so until we combat that scourge, on a fundamental level, I don't think that we're going to make much progress. Now, the second reason why we have this kind of problem is that the law enforcement process has been supine. It's laid prostrate and is the unable likely to bring perpetrators of electoral injustice and mayhem to justice. Every election cycle, You see the managers of our electoral process issuing orders, engaging in voters' education, persuading voters not to engage in criminalities. But when some voters engage in these criminalities, there's likely no consequence. So, and that's...
So is this some kind of evil that we have to live with
No,
as a nation?
that's not what I'm saying. It brings about a culture of impunity that nothing is going to happen anyway. So if you snatch ballot boxes, if you kill somebody, or if you buy votes and you are caught even, the political merchants will come in to get you released, and then the body language of INEC is not to seriously consider this prosecution. They have a statutory duty to prosecute is in the Electoral Act, and I'm referring to Section 149 and Section 150 there, which says that even in election petitions, which are civil in nature, if there are recommendations that certain perpetrators of electoral crimes should be punished, INEC has the responsibility to do that, and that magistrate courts and state high courts have jurisdiction to do that. Now, we've seen that year in, year out, or every 4 years, this has never happened. You've not seen a synergy between the Attorney General of the Federation and INEC insisting on prosecution of these electoral offenders. Why do I talk about this synergy? And I hope that this year they will be able to do something about that. There is a dilemma here. The dilemma is that the Electoral Act is a federal legislation. It's not a state legislation. The electoral offenses therein contained, therefore, are federal offenses. Now, by some funny draftsmanship, the Electoral Act then makes high courts in the states and magistrate courts in the states as the fora for prosecution of those electoral offenses, meaning that federal offenses will now be prosecuted in state courts, right? And so to do that constitutionally, you will need federal officers liaising with state attorney general to be able to prosecute in those state high courts, right? EFCC has been doing that always. And so the Attorney General of the Federation, INEC, will have to build a synergy. I don't want to listen to the platitudes of, we're going to prosecute electoral offenders. You're not going to do it. And that's why...
You probably have to wait for another 4 years.
4 years. So because of that culture of impunity, therefore, there is a perpetuation of this problem. And that's why you're asking the question whether we continue to live with the evil of this. And finally, we have a cultural problem. It's not a macro culture. I'm talking about electoral culture, which is a counterculture anyway. Electoral culture here. And what's the culture here? Politicians spend humongous amounts in their primaries. This is a fact. And I don't think that we should engage in serious debate about this. Even for the parties, that are the big parties and all that. This is what they engage in every time, they bribe themselves to secure the mandates of their parties, to win primaries and all that. And so if they do that, why do we even think that when it then comes to the general election, they won't buy votes? They won't pervert the process, all to get to the center of power. So we need to deal with all this if we want to get serious about. But again, as we've often said, and this has become a cliche now, introduction of technology can indeed cut out many of these things. That's the truth.
You touched on something very important. You began by talking about how the legal system is supposed to deal with the industry of vote buying. But then you seem to come back to the cultural part of it, because in any industry, or for any industry to thrive, there must be the seller and somebody who is willing to buy. In this case, a lot of people have said poverty is one of the contributors to the fact that people are willing to sell their votes because there is poverty. is it possible for a poor person ever to say no when they get money, when offered money? Because already our courts are overwhelmed. So we might need to begin to look at a situation where we're doing something socially and culturally to ensure that we shield our courts from overload. Is it possible ever for a poor man to say, no, I'm not going to sell my vote? Mr. Ikemese.
Okay, so it's quite interesting listening to Mr. GT, who I must add is my learned senior because I originally trained as a lawyer, right? When he highlighted the cultural aspect of this, and I think it's very key. So let's harp back to the earlier part of our conversation where you talked about voter education. Now, I think we have this very structured and very narrow conception of what voter education is, where people think it's around educating people about how the electoral process works, dealing with the mechanics of voting, as it were. We need to realize that we are slowly getting to the point where in a year or in a two, we would have actually been a country where we've spent more years under democratic rule than under military rule.